Welcome to Capitol Catch-Up, your deep dive into the daily workings of the United States Congress. I am Victor.
And I am Lainey. Today, we are walking you through the House proceedings from July 21st and July 22nd, 2016. We saw a mix of intense debates on foreign policy, crucial domestic resource issues, and some significant procedural actions.
Let us start with a major point of contention that spanned both days, and that is the ongoing military operations in Iran. On July 21st, the House floor saw sharp political criticism regarding the high financial costs of this war. Members openly questioned the administration's spending requests and called for much greater congressional oversight.
That is right, Victor. For everyday Americans, this is a discussion about where tax dollars are going and how foreign policy decisions impact the national budget. The debate continued into July 22nd, focusing specifically on the funding of these military operations. This ties directly into a massive legislative procedure that began that same day, the initiation of proceedings for the National Defense Authorization Act for Fiscal Year 2027.
For our listeners who might not be familiar with the terminology, the National Defense Authorization Act is the annual policy bill that authorizes funding for the Department of Defense. It is one of the most critical pieces of legislation Congress handles each year because it sets the budget, benefits for service members, and military strategy. Seeing the debate over Iran funding heat up just as the proceedings for this Defense Act begin shows how central foreign policy spending is to the overall defense budget discussions.
Absolutely. And while foreign policy occupied a lot of time, there was also a very important bipartisan discussion about domestic resources, specifically water rights in New Mexico. On July 22nd, lawmakers raised serious concerns over how federal drilling practices are affecting local ranchers.
This is a vital issue for everyday Americans in the West. Ranching relies heavily on predictable water access. When federal drilling practices conflict with local water rights, it directly impacts the livelihoods of families who have run these ranches for generations. The fact that this discussion was bipartisan highlights how resource management and local agricultural survival can transcend party lines when community survival is at stake.
It really shows the balance Congress has to strike between federal energy development and local community needs. Now, shifting back to July 21st, we also saw a major focus on civil rights. The House marked the 36th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act.
The Americans with Disabilities Act is a landmark piece of civil rights legislation. During this session, members engaged in a bipartisan debate about the legislative intent of the law. They specifically focused on the integration of individuals with disabilities and recent guidance issued by the Department of Justice.
This debate is highly relevant to everyday Americans because Department of Justice guidance determines how the law is enforced in real-world settings, like workplaces, schools, and public spaces. Lawmakers are trying to ensure that the original intent of the law, which is full integration and equal opportunity, is being actively upheld by modern federal rules.
Beyond policy, there was also a notable amount of tension on the House floor. On July 21st, criticisms regarding the president's legacy and building projects in Washington, D.C. became so sharp that the chair had to step in. The chair formally reminded members to avoid personal attacks.
That is a key part of congressional decorum. House rules strictly govern how members can talk about the president and each other to maintain order and respect during debates, even when disagreements are intense.
Speaking of House rules and procedures, we also had a formal notification on July 22nd regarding a subpoena served to Representative Sara Jacobs. In congressional procedure, when a member of the House is served with a subpoena, formal notification must be read on the House floor to place it in the official record. This ensures transparency and keeps the chamber informed of legal actions involving its members.
It is a reminder of the legal and oversight mechanisms always operating in the background. But the proceedings were not just about policy and politics. Both days featured moments of national mourning and local tributes, which really show how members of Congress use their platform to amplify the voices of their home districts.
Yes, on July 22nd, the House formally mourned the tragic loss of the Long family, who passed away in a Utah flash flood. Members offered their deep condolences and expressed support for the surviving daughter. It was a somber moment that brought the chamber together in shared grief.
There were also celebratory moments. Members delivered one-minute speeches to honor community figures. We heard tributes to the 20th anniversary of the Morgan County Boys and Girls Club, recognizing its service to local youth. There was also praise for the journalistic contributions of the local newspaper, the Hudson Independent.
They also honored the legacies of individuals who made significant impacts in their communities, including Rebecca Zamarodian and Dr. Patricia Lopez. And on July 21st, there were celebratory remarks honoring various community leaders, local organizations, and military veterans. These speeches are a traditional way for representatives to thank public servants and civic groups back home.
It really highlights the dual role of a member of Congress. On one hand, they are debating massive international defense budgets, and on the other, they are honoring a local newspaper or a youth club.
As we wrap up today's episode, let us look at what listeners should watch out for in the coming days. First, keep an eye on the development of the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2027, especially how the funding for military operations in Iran is debated. Second, watch for any updates on the New Mexico water rights discussions and federal drilling regulations. Finally, pay attention to how the discussions around the Department of Justice guidance on the Americans with Disabilities Act progress.
That is all for today's Capital Catch-up. Thank you for listening, and we will see you next time.
Goodbye, everyone.